I typically use a personal anecdote or physical reference to open most of the episodes of Feature Creep, but not this time. See, I've never gone fishing before, which is weird because I live next to one of the most popular fishing destinations in the world. Why haven't I gone fishing before? I don't know. At least I've done plenty of fishing in video games. Not gonna lie, I'm a little nervous. This is the big one. Of all the quirky additions and classic staples of video game features, fishing is one of the earliest instant success stories with the most obvious reach. It stretches across the genres, across time, hemispheres, and has almost become a mandated inclusion by the industry and its consumers. Its implementation encompasses every part of the spectrum, from simple button press minigames to fully fleshed out simulations with lure and line choices meant to optimize catching specific fish. Video games have covered fishing in almost every incarnation. As pastime, as career, as sport, as survival skill, the list goes on and on. Fishing's the chum in the water, and we're frenzying at the smell. We've fallen for fishing, hook, line, and sinker. And today we're going to learn a little about why, and what you find out might surprise you. Fishing in games isn't just a neat side activity. There's a significant purpose behind its conclusion, and several reasons we gravitate to it, like bait on a line. Sounds a bit fishy? Trust me, after this deep dive, you'll be swimming to my tune. But that's enough floundering around. School is in session, and I'd like to keep things flowing. I'm also getting tired of these puns. They stink. You could say they smell a bit fishy. Fish puns. That's what we're doing today. Anyway, fishing's video game origins are nearly as old as video games themselves. We recognize fishing in games as a casual, chill minigame involving we, ourselves, and us, but the first fishing game was quite the opposite. Say hello to Fishing Derby, the first ever fishing video game, and a competitive one at that. Sitting on opposite docks, you and another fisher compete to see who can fish 99 pounds of fish first. Fish get heavier the closer to the bottom of the arena they are, and there's a big shark which will try to eat any fish you try to reel in. Fishing Derby was also the first multiplayer fishing game, and given its mechanics, I'm sure it was also one of the first multiplayer games to inspire physical confrontation between siblings. Look, the game doesn't want me to win. Like the shark and player green are in cahoots. You fucking asshole. You fucking asshole. What a fucking... But you might recognize the future in this guppy of the past. The movement of the fish on your line, the problem solving of navigating the water, and the threats to your catch, on top of the risk of it getting away from you. Fishing Derby is the blueprint for the fishing minigames you might have played before, some which simplified its competitive nature, and others which latched onto said competition and added more and more complexities to the challenge. Fishing Derby encapsulates what any fishing feature needs, but it also contained certain qualities foreign to its contemporaries. Whereas titles like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong had steep learning curves and punished players for anything but the most optimal playstyles, Fishing Derby had an angle of accessibility. Even though players could obviously lose, the immediate measurement of how close they were to winning was encouraging, and a great way to determine what they could change about how they were playing. The controls of Fishing Derby were as simple as other arcade and home console games at the time, but the applications of those controls were easy to grasp and master. This isn't to say, wow, see how much better Fishing Derby is than Pac-Man, for all the fossils out there who still play video games. It's to point out how important Fishing Derby still is. This accessibility is what defines fishing and fishing in games today, and why we continue to see it in the titles we play. Fishing tends to be a pretty repetitive task, so it needs to be approachable in small amounts. This is why you'll often find fishing in games spread throughout the playthrough in specific areas or built in as an action to take sporadically as you perform other interactions. Animal Crossing's fishing minigame, for example, can be performed anywhere there's a body of water, and different fish are naturally found in different areas. You'll always have a fishing rod on you. Well, in most of the Animal Crossing series, you will. And once in a while, on your way to catch some bugs or help a villager out with one of their requests, might spot the shadow of a fish in a nearby lake. You cast your line, wait for the bob to plunk underneath the water, and smash the A button to reel out a fish. then be on your merry way. Animal Crossing's fishing minigame is an example of the baseline of all fishing in games and is a huge hint for what any fishing game needs to be, an easy-to-achieve break in the gameplay loop. The act of fishing, whether it's in the physical or digital world, might as well be a time-stopping superpower. The meditative qualities of fishing are only available to us if we can easily access it, and when players are able to do so, Zen can be achieved. When you cast your line, nothing else matters. Paying your bills, registering for classes, the hours left before work, these concerns go away. Your worries wash out, and the only object to focus on is the bobber, the line, and the ripples in the water. Unless you're a cynic and don't believe in any of that mushy-gushy sentimental crap. Now, in your case, a simple fishing minigame is another objective to complete, which is why many iterations of fishing in games come with a completion list and varieties of aquatic animals to find in specific locations. But you're just as much of a sucker as the rest of us, because the fishing is enacting all this sentimental subterfuge on you anyway. Fishing is still a break in the narrative of the RPG you're playing. It's still another part of clearing out the region of activities. It's still acting as a breather from what can otherwise be an overstimulating experience. Seriously, the stop-and-go nature of these simpler fishing minigames is a metaphorical breath you're taking in between main scenario cutscenes and difficult gameplay segments. It creates time between one story beat and the next, something video game narratives are constantly struggling to get across when players railroad themselves through the central story. Does a lot of other extra content achieve this? Of course, but few do it as well as fishing does, and a huge reason why is because of how easy it is to start fishing and keep fishing once you've started. But over the years, fishing in games has needed to grow from these basic concepts in order to remain interesting to an audience of players who've become familiar with it. The one-button minigame has really been run into the ground nowadays. As with any popular feature, demand for innovation and added depth continues to grow. We always want more, and game developers are up to the task. The notable examples incorporate more of fishing's struggling mechanics. You don't just reel in a fish once it takes the bait. There's a push and pull fight between it and you. Sometimes you have to give the line slack or else it snaps. You have to lean your body in the same direction the fish is swimming and know when to start reeling it in, or else you'll be fighting it until the sun goes down. The most rudimentary implementation of this is adding a series of button prompts as opposed to just one. From there, we see more of the yes, no sensation of a fish's behavior messing up your ability to bring it in. Vibration technology in controllers up the ante on fishing. Incorrect stick inputs could be cautioned against with a vibrating controller. Developers could even add character to the fish in their game by matching vibrations with volatility of movement, getting across a particular fish's temperament. This is a key component of the modern take on fishing in games and of real fishing. A fish is a living thing, and every fish you reel in will put up a fight. It's a confrontation between man and nature. One incredibly one-sided fight for the most part, which could potentially destroy our ecosystems and leave us more screwed than we already are on this planet if mass fishing continues at the rate it's going, but a confrontation nonetheless. An experienced fisher can tell what kind of fish is on their line depending on how it fights back and the way it moves. They know how to predict its movements depending on what it's already doing, and they know how long it can fight until it runs out of stamina to continue struggling. It goes without saying, but plenty of fishing minigames with these movement-based challenges are successful in producing the same results out of the player. Reeling in a common rarity fish is relatively straightforward and easy, but you know when you've hooked the legendary one. When a fish infamous for being difficult to catch gets snagged on your hook, you have to pull out all the stops to keep it from getting away. With enough practice, it's fairly easy to tell which fish you're in the process of reeling in, just like a real fisher. And hopefully, over time, this personification of every fish brings with it a massive respect for the creatures. After all, any prey animal which can avoid capture so many times deserves a little recognition for its tenacity. There isn't a whole lot of spiritualism behind fishing, but the soul of it comes from this engagement with the wild, this brief moment between you and a force of nature. Many people who fish for sport endeavor to ensure this can continue to be an experience for years to come. I can't confidently say every step has made a huge ethical difference, but catch and release hooks are commonly used on a lot of fishing shows and tournaments because they're supposedly safer for the fish itself. Though I'm not sure if catch and release hooks are actually safer at all, or if hooks are only part of a greater issue. There's a lot of segments on those shows dedicated to the dangers of overfishing and being mindful of the ecosystems we're fishing in too. Regardless, it's disappointing to say, if we don't clean up our act and find better ways to respect the animals we're challenging, fishing video games might be the only way to experience it in the future. But capturing the soul of fishing doesn't necessarily require this implementation. It also might get in the way of someone's desire to play with it. The more complex a particular interaction gets, the less a player might engage with it for a long period of time. Stardew Valley's fishing minigame received a lot of flack when it came out, but it's honestly a great parallel to real fishing without eliminating the accessibility of it. It retains the one-button control scheme, but requires the player to keep a green bar underneath the fish icon for a set amount of time. The green bar has a bit of a floaty, bouncy feel to it, as though it were drifting inside a body of water, and the player's button presses push it upward as it sinks to the bottom, simulating the give and take of more in-depth systems. Every fish in Stardew Valley has a unique swimming pattern players can learn over time, and better predict its movement on the meter the entire minigame takes place on. Pokemon, of all things, has another simplified version. Fishing is just another Pokemon battle, but a battle all the same. You know what kind of fish you can catch with an old rod, you know what kind of fish you can catch in the body of water next to the SS Anne in gold, silver, and crystal, and you know what you need to do and avoid doing in order to catch them. So a good fishing minigame doesn't necessarily need to involve larger mechanics or brand new controls. It can achieve what all these other fishing games do with a lot less, as long as it knows what those fishing games are trying to recreate. So far in this series, there's been a lot of praising smaller forms of the subject we're covering and explaining how games completely devoted to those features tend to miss the mark of what makes them interesting. I find myself underwhelmed by the examples on Feature Creep trying their best to fully flesh out things like cooking, for example. With fishing, I'm happy to say it isn't the case. When fishing in games gets serious, it only tends to get better as far as recreating the real-life thing. Take the advanced fishing gameplay, now add different types of fishing rods, different kinds of baits and lures, give fishing its own dedicated side quest chain, and eventually you'll turn it into a standalone VR experience like Final Fantasy XV did. Probably my favorite version of a fishing minigame yet. Fishing in Final Fantasy XV pays respect to the art itself, greatly focusing on your choice of equipment and on the time and place you choose to fish. It features a questline building up to the Liege of the Lake, a legendary fish rumored to be uncatchable, and a challenge for a starry-eyed Noctis who loves fishing. Noctis's romanticization of fishing works well with the nuances of Final Fantasy XV's fishing system. It's a great way to humanize our protagonist and help us relate to him easier. Us humans, we love to have hobbies. We love getting invested in the subterranean details of particular subjects piquing our interest. And we love knowing there's someone out there with as much passion for a niche area of expertise as we have for our own. Listening to a person I just met talk about the specifics of bird watching moves a sigh of relief through my body and out my face as I realize, yeah, you got the stuff. You get it. You have the capacity to love something enough to learn more about it. That makes me happy to know we have this in common. But not every niche is necessarily technical or robust enough for this feeling to survive the transition to gameplay, but fishing is. And watching a character go into the nitty-gritty of fishing, or fishing as a particular character and having all the specifics made obvious to you through gameplay, is a bridge between you and them. Noctis cares about fishing a lot, and you care about Noctis, so you care about fishing a lot. But these are intensely gamified examples of nuanced fishing games. If you truly want to see the apex representation of fishing in games, look to fishing simulators like Fishing Planet. These titles seek to replicate the overwhelming customization and variety in real fishing and do an amazing job. Too amazing for most people. On top of being able to customize the hell out of your equipment, lures and baits have physical and hydrodynamic properties, and there are tons of possible combinations which affect your fishing in multiple ways. Weather systems and wind conditions, which factor into casting your line and fish migration patterns. Vehicles to choose from with different utilities. Advanced fish AI meant to respond to various minutiae. And most of all, waiting. Lots and lots of waiting. Fishing is supposed to be accessible. It's about having respect for the ecosystem, and it's about patience. But this last part can't always be added to fishing in games. Too much waiting can be boring. You typically don't want one part of the content to kill the rest of the momentum in your game, but patience is one of the greatest lessons fishing can teach you. In order to fish, you have to accept the fish aren't always going to be biting. You have to learn to wait and be comfortable in waiting, because becoming restless can upset the water and make it even harder for anything to tug on your line. You have to grow confident in the silence of still water in order to seize the moment you feel the pull on your hands and the challenge presents itself. And this means waiting. Titles like Fishing Planet will ask you to study your marks and wait patiently because their goal is to impart all of what fishing entails. They really are the fully realized evolution of fishing in games, and if you want to experience it, I highly recommend you grab a fishing simulator and give it time to teach it to you. From the humble beginnings of Fishing Derby, to the mechanical diversity of Final Fantasy XV and Stardew Valley, to the faithful recreations of Fishing Planet, fishing in games is a colossus of game design history. Despite its tenure, it's always aimed for the same goal, and every version of it out there is trying to reach it in its own way. They never fall short. They're simply just trying to be the biggest fish in their respective ponds.